everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is the third episode of Futurescapes, and today we'll be talking about the future of skills. How many master's degrees does a candidate need to be hired in your company? If you're ahead of the curve, the answer is probably none. Successful brands are finding new ways to tap into employee skill sets that have nothing to do with education. And with opportunities to upskill, these employees are happier and healthier as well. So today we're speaking to our experts about the fluid nature of the new employee, how the pandemic has forced us to rethink skill sets, and how you can pick the right candidate for your company. So first of all, we have Professor Loredana Padurean, Associate Dean of the Asia School of Business. Thank you for joining us today. I think the audio might be on.
Yes.
There we go. Lovely. And then we also have Anne Tam, the founder and CEO of Ace Adventure.
Hello, everybody. Good to be here. Thank you.
Hi. And finally, we have Jeff Sandhu, who is the head of 42KL.
Hi, hello.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me today on the webinar. So let's jump straight into it and set the scene, right? Since we're talking about the future of skills and education, I want to start by asking you what you've learned during the pandemic, important lessons that will change the way you see your future as players in this scene. Professor Loredana, would you mind going first?
Thank you, Christine. Hi, everybody. So as an academic, what I have learned, and as an educator, what I have learned is that learning can happen everywhere. And I think many of the schools, including ours, including MIT, including Harvard, prior to the pandemic, we were very dead set on in-person learning. I don't think that post-pandemic we're going to remain online, because what we have learned in the last 3-4 days since we were able to come back to a hybrid mode is that physical presence matters a lot. But what we are also learning is that hybrid will be probably the optimal mode to go forward, because there are sessions that have to happen in person and there are sessions that don't. And synchronous learning and asynchronous learning, I think, is going to be a lot more prevalent. As a person, what I have learned during the pandemic is that mental health is more important than anything, next to physical health. And as a manager and as a leader, I have learned that probably we need to be a lot more sympathetic and empathetic to both the physical, the mental, and the overall well-being to our staff.
How about you, Jeff? What have you learned during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think I echo Professor there, talking about learning can happen anywhere. We've seen that as well. But I think what I'm quite new in the education spaces. It's been about 1.5 years now. I came from the media industry, right? So moving over to the education space during a pandemic, initially it was quite a challenging task, and trying to put out a new concept of learning to Malaysians. But what I noticed is actually the desire and the hunger that we have. And I think what the pandemic has brought on is that a lot more individuals are now looking at alternative ways to go about this upskilling and reskilling, right? It's no more, kind of like forced upon them by senior managers or their, heads of departments. They themselves, these individuals, a lot of them are actually, pretty much really hungry, going about sourcing for information and how they can, learn things, even just going through like, YouTube and stuff, right? So I feel like, the one thing that I've really learned is just that the opportunities are out there, and what the pandemic has brought on is this made us hungry to reach out for that opportunities.
Yeah, definitely a lot more initiative is being taken now by people as well. Anne, how about you? What did you learn?
Actually, it's the bravery of our frontliners in Malaysia and across the world. Whenever when people talk about a country being under attack, right? People rise to the occasion and so on. But when we see how committed our frontliners are, it's just amazing. So the first things, we want to thank all of you. Okay, and our hearts go out to all of you. And on the education front, it's actually the ability to adapt and pivot. So parents are beginning to see whether education on the ground, whether that's happening, right? And it is very, very difficult to adapt and pivot, especially when you're dealing with the primary and secondary education. The more of the adapting and pivoting is happening at the tertiary education and also professional level. But when it comes down to primary and secondary, it's so difficult. And you can see that because I got feedback, not just in our country, from many people around the world, because they were facing, even the first world nations, they were facing the same problems that we're facing here, because a lot of the education at primary and secondary is still very traditional, right? So how then, if something traditional cannot pivot and adapt, then how in the world are these systems supposed to help the kids adapt? So that was one of those things that came up, over the past 2 years, actually. The other one is that we realize the academic learning, we know it's not enough, right? But what we have learned is that even like online and everything, you want it to be effective, you have to wrap the human component around it. The human, like literally to engage the kids, they need to love it, they need to enjoy it, they need to want to learn. But if you do the traditional way, it's not going to happen. And the last one is that the parents all over the world, they realize this for the kids. And you need to, and schools, the future of it you have to be prepared that the acquisition of knowledge, the school is not just a space for acquisition of knowledge anymore, right? We have to work on getting the kids, the school's a place to apply what they learn and also to learn human skills. So I give you one example, because I have this little device that I won't show it because I know that has to do with IP and everything. So the device for our face, it is using light. So you learn that this device uses invisible infrared light, visible light at wavelengths of 630, ultrasound wave. I have no clue what they all are. I remember learning about them in school, but it is the application of them that the children need to know. Yeah.
I see. Now, if anyone has any questions for our panelists, do leave them in the comments down below. We are on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, so please let us know any questions that you have. But for now, I have a question for Anne. So speaking of innovation, right, which is one of the points that you brought up, last year you announced a new international private school in collaboration with Penang's oldest convent, and that seems like a really good blend of old and new. How would you rank the local education system's openness to innovation and implementing some of the more advanced skills that you've been championing at your institutions?
Okay, may I have the permission to be very blunt?
Sure.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to show you something here. This clock. This is a clock, right? This is the old style clock. It's still my alarm clock. The point is that if you look at the device inside the clock, that is what the education system is. Okay, the way we are teaching right now is what the device is inside, but what they need to know is everything outside it, as to what the device is used for, and even more importantly is to get them to figure out that device, can it be used for something else? Can you use to create something else out of it? So that's what's missing in education, right? So I had the actually opportunity to speak to some of the leaders in our education department, like top leaders, political one. I had the opportunity to speak to them, but it was really odd. It was really hard because first there are a lot of things coming at them regarding education, so it's very, very hard for them to choose. The other one is actually they looked at me funny because they had no clue what I was talking about. Okay. Because it is traditional. It is very traditional, right? So that was my experience. But I just want to put it out there. There's not just our country. It is across so many continents, right? You're talking about Asia for sure, Middle East. You're talking about many countries in Europe as well, South America, Africa, Central America. These are feedback from people in those regions who actually spoke to me about when they heard what we are doing, right? So what we did was actually to bootstrap ourselves. Okay, in our own country, I bootstrapped with my whole entire team to do what we had to do. Okay, and last but not least, the sisters. But what we found is that because we bootstrapped ourselves for the past 13 years, more and more people are recognizing that things need to change, and they're very excited about what we're doing. So much so that they're stepping in to help. But the best one are the sisters of the convent school. They really like the fact that we're going to be providing children with more value than just academic value, so that it will help them to succeed in the future when they graduate, 15 years from now. Okay.
Fantastic. Yeah. And, you know, thinking about that sort of that sort of drive and that hunger for innovation as well. Jeff, earlier this year, a team from 42KL won the runner-up spots in a global ecological hackathon. And interestingly, none of them had any prior experience in machine learning. So is that the sort of objective of the 42KL concept, to show that your background sort of doesn't matter when it comes to upskilling and reskilling? Or like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that definitely caught the attention of a lot of people who figured, like, who had this assumption that, you know, if you want to really excel in the field of computer science, for example, you know, you have to have some certain foundations. Even in primary school, you need to be really good in mathematics, for example, and, you know, you probably need to go for a diploma in computer science before you can sort of really, you know, get up to an industry level, right? But what 42 does is trying to break that idea that, you know, people have about, or that misconception that people have about computer science. It's actually so broad, and it's so easily accessible for you to learn at this point of time, that we had students from, you know, the youngest, the age of 18 years old, who did not even have SPM, and all the way up to the oldest student that we have is like 49 years old, who's like semi-retired, and they come from various backgrounds. Some of them have you know, graduated in the field of medical science. Some of them were lawyers, accountants. But what we train here in 42 is that they go through, the first step is like a 1 month long intensive boot camp to get them to be used to the idea of peer-to-peer learning. With, you know, this kind of environment or an ecosystem where you come in, you have an objective that you need to, you know, solve a particular challenge, but you have to work with your peers. We don't provide you with tutors or trainers or teachers. We have none of those. We don't tell you a specific time when the class is supposed to happen. You arrange it yourself. And if you can continue that habit of being hungry to learn, and being open to share ideas with one another, work, you know, as soon as you have a challenge, you know, do you immediately try to, you know, ask your peers for help, or do you try to figure out yourself? You know, it's about learning your own limits of where are you capable of, you know, in a very like you know, difficult environment. If you do that for a month, it becomes a habit in you, in that sense. Like, whenever there's a problem, whenever there's a challenge, you immediately kind of like, you know, I'll take this on, and try to, you know, do my best about this, right? So we went through that 1 month boot camp with these students, and from there is where they are now learning the fundamentals of what the industry requires. And that team that won, you know, that second place, they came from that boot camp, right? So I think 4 months into our core program, you know, we were alerted about this competition that was happening globally, and we decided, is, you know, let's just give it a shot. No expectations. Machine learning is something that we have not touched yet in our curriculum. And they decided to, let's just give it a shot. You know, if they could learn the basics of computer science within 26 days, maybe they can learn the basics of machine learning in 48 hours. And we were like, yeah, you know, why not? Like, let's give it a try. And to our surprise, it is the mindset that they applied, in that, you know, if they were given a task, they were, you know, had to come up with a visualizer, they had to come up with an algorithm that can solve, you know, real data specific challenges. That was, you know, part of the program. What they did was, you know, spend 48 hours working among themselves, knowing where to delegate each task, knowing the abilities of their teammates. And that was actually, you know, what we see can be applied into many different aspects, right? So that's what we're really proud of, to show, like, you know, learning doesn't necessarily have to happen in an environment where it's controlled. It can happen in an open environment, a collaborative environment that has, you know, people from all walks of life, in that inclusive environment. That's what we want, and it can happen at any point of time. You know, you can learn things online, but what we do is that we want to have the physical environment, because when you are in like-minded community, you know, 100 to 200, our goal is to reach up to 500 students in our community. Imagine being in the environment where every single one of these individuals are driven, they've gone through that intensive boot camp. Whatever challenges that you throw at them, they have that mindset to, like, you know, I want to be able to solve this. And that desire and hunger is what we try to actually instill in 42.
Yeah, basically creating that sort of environment and that community in order to support them, essentially learning how to learn, right? And I think that's really fascinating that it's both supporting the community as a whole, but also each individual person is able to really figure out how they look at learning and how they can apply their skills, in a relevant way, right? And Professor Loredana as well. I think one thing that's really interesting is that we've been talking a little bit about how education is very traditional, and MBAs, for example, have been around for a very long time, since in fact 1908. But they've continued to change with the times. And recently, I know you're really passionate about redefining terminology when it comes to reflecting, education and learning, especially in the post-pandemic landscape when it comes to MBAs, specifically looking at sharp skills as well. Can you just expand on that a little bit for us?
Yes, thank you, Christine. And Jeff, congratulations to your team. That's amazing. So you're right, Christine. The MBA is a 100-year-old product. And I think like everything that is 100 years old needs every now and then a makeover. And actually at Asia School of Business, an MBA, which stands for Master of Business Administration, we look at this and we said, who does administration these days? Nobody does administration. I don't think I use the word administration ever. So we actually call our own program a Master of Business in Action, because just like Jeff and Anne talked about before me, we think that learning can happen very differently than the traditional models. And one way of learning is by working with companies, startups, NGOs, government agencies to put our students in a practical environment, not just in a theoretical environment. And this is very much obviously something that we have learned from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT Sloan, which is our partner in this. But this idea of challenging, semantics, or the way you said it, terminology, I don't do it just for the sake of, creating noise around it. Just the same way I don't like the word administration when it comes to Masters of Business Administration. Who administers business anymore? And we call it a Masters of Business in Action, because we do learn about business in action. I have a massive problem with soft and hard skills. So I don't know about you guys, but when I think of soft skills, and if I look at the definition in the dictionary, soft is associated with, gentle, tender, things that are not really reflecting the importance of soft skills. And the same thing with hard. I was raised in a communist system where hard skills were the only thing that mattered. So I was very good at math for a while. I didn't like it, but I was good at it. But I was raised very much that math and physics are going to make or break my career. And it turns out that the more I evolved in my career, the more I needed the other kind of skills. And, there's also this implication that if something is hard, it's challenging, it's heavy, it's rigid, it's impenetrable, or it's static, right? If something is hard, like a stone or like this, it's static. And maybe math has not evolved very much in the last 300 years, with the exception if you look at machine learning, obviously. But these skills have to evolve, and they constantly have to be sharpened. You can't really just say, I learned a software language 5 months ago and I'm good, I never have to learn it again. I think of these skills to be sharpened. And speaking how old the MBA program is, 1908, soft and hard skills, I don't know if you guys know, but they were invented as a terminology in 1972 by a US Army doctor who looked around at his troops and he said, some of the soldiers are very good at the hard stuff, I guess shooting. I don't know exactly what he thought by hard stuff, but machines and, guns, etc. And for everything else that had to be dealt with people, we're going to call them soft. So at ASB, I said when I joined ASB in 2015, when we launched the program, I said, nobody from this school is going to graduate with soft and hard skills, but we're going to get smart and sharp. Because to be very honest, the absence of soft skills doesn't make you hard. The absence of soft makes you dumb. Therefore, we're going to call them smart skills. And we're going to call the skills that we traditionally call hard, we're going to call them sharp. And before I pass on the word to the other speakers, I just want to say, you could very much say, well, you're just changing words. What's the big deal? And it's true. We are just changing words. But I think we live in a space and in an environment and in a time where we look at words, we look at language to reflect our values. the same way we don't call chicks in the workplace anymore, or girls, or whatever you want to call it, and we have evolved to reflect the society values. I think giving respect to smart skills and acknowledging that without them, and I think Anne called them human skills, without them one cannot succeed. And also showing respect to the evolution of sharp skills that constantly have to be updated. It's a much more appropriate terminology.
I mean, I think, when it comes to renaming something, like that will redefine it, right? No matter if people are just saying, oh, you're just renaming it just for the sake of it. Actually, it does take it in a different direction. Your idea of it is going to change based on, how you're approaching it, how you're naming it. So I don't think that it's a particularly fantastic argument just to say that you're renaming things kind of for fun. It has a purpose, and I think that's really important to note. And I think speaking of sort of innovation and learning, right, there's a lot of talk at the moment about upskilling, reskilling, new ways of learning. But I think for people who have maybe been in the workforce for a fair amount of time, it may be easy to feel a bit left behind, right? So my question here is this sort of a young person's game? I think we often forget that older people still make up a significant portion of the working population, right? So how do we factor all the generations into the future of skills? Anne, let's start with you.
Okay, actually, just to, I have had an intern coming from Asia School of Business, interning in our school before, in our organization, and believe me, the way they think and do things is very, very different. So, I'll share with you in what manner, all right? Because the way what Professor Loredana said, talked about the sharp and the smart skills, there's actually another term for it, which I came across for the soft skills, right? Yes, in our school, we call them the human skills, but I would agree with this other terminology as well, that is the power skills of the future. Because until and unless you name it properly for the parents and educators out there, they're not going to adopt it. It's just a soft skill. Even human skills is not going to cut it for a lot of educators and parents. But power skills, when it's something that they can use to create power when they're out there working, or smart or sharp skills, they work as well. So for me, I'm looking at, we talk about the skills that we require today is already unrecognizable. Okay, and one of them is what Jeff was sharing about what he does with 42KL. Yeah, it's cognitive flexibility. Which is the kids not necessarily having to know the knowledge of the hard skills first in order to create. They're already creating without even knowing it, and the crossing skills from left, right, and center, and all around them. So cognitive flexibility is one of them. The other is being personable, being dynamic. I mean, where are you going to get that? But this is critically what the kids need. And the future of it is not about leadership anymore. It's about the ability to move people. Today, we require it. It's going to be even more, needed in the future, right? And I just want to end this question with this. I was watching. I managed to catch this old comedy from BBC. Yes, Prime Minister. And I crack up every time I watch it, right? So I managed to watch a rerun of it. And so I think it was, if I'm not wrong, it was Humphrey, one of the characters. He's probably the Home Secretary or something. And he said that, actually it's important. The civil service is important because we have the experience. You don't need to have experience to be a Prime Minister. I'm like, it's true. Where do you get the experience from, right? Before you can be a Prime Minister. So I cracked up. So it's something out there for people to think about. I thought it's relevant.
Yes. I mean, I guess it's sort of to say that no matter what your level of experience is, no matter how long you've been in the workforce, right, learning is always going to be crucial. And I think, definitely it's something that people are, I think as has been mentioned earlier, it's something people are really taking a lot of notice of and are really taking the initiative to do for themselves. And now, because like you said, experience is no longer kind of everything. You really need to to factor in everything else. I do want to ask a little bit as well. we've all been remote working for a while now. We've been hybrid working from home, whatever you want to call it. We've not necessarily been in a physical space with each other and all that, right? So tell me a little bit about how you guys think remote working from home, even learning from home, impacts the way we view skills in any way. I would love, Jeff, if you could answer that question.
Yeah, I think remote learning or remote working has really changed the way how we can approach this continuous learning behavior, right? I think previously it was very constrained, it was very restricted. You have to be in a physical space somewhere to be able to absorb and be able to learn things or to do work. What the pandemic has done has actually changed that mindset, right? So now we're blending in work or learning in an environment where it's our own comfort zone, right? So it's like whether it's in our bedroom or in our home. What 42 actually we ourselves has done is we started off as a physical space. It's a physical peer-to-peer learning environment, and it's something that we've really wanted to showcase the impact that it could have, right? And the pandemic has changed our, I guess, initial stage in bringing this out to Malaysia, and our shift from moving from a physical only environment to a now hybrid, but we had a pure online only or a virtual environment, was kind of like the shift that no other 42 campus has embarked. And we've got like 30 over campus around the world. Malaysia is like one of the first in Southeast Asia, and we were the first to sort of move into this virtual environment. And we realized that there's a lot of potential. While physical, I think Professor was mentioning about the physical environment is still very much important, and now we're seeing when students are allowed to come back, there is the benefit. But what virtual has done is actually open up the access. What we've seen, we've actually benefited from this is that once we went on to a virtual environment, a lot more people were actually more interested to learn about what is 42, what is peer-to-peer learning, how do you actually go about in learning through a gamified system. These are the kind of things where we notice that it can attract more people to come forward and be more adaptive to being able to learn at any point at anywhere. And then now we're doing this in a hybrid environment. We're slowly getting the students to come back to the physical space. They actually have that I guess desire again to maybe I would want to visit the space and maybe to do some exams in the physical setting, be able to speak to like-minded peers as well. It gives them that hook, right? I guess online has really opened up that access. Now you're not just limited to that physical space.
Absolutely. Now we have a question here from Facebook from Frida. Should entrepreneurial skills be taught in education? Professor Loredana, since I feel like this is very up your alley, would you mind addressing that?
Well, Frida, thank you for this question. I think you know the answer, and the answer is absolutely yes. And they should be taught from kindergarten to primary school to secondary, all the way to PhD program. I think I'm a professor of entrepreneurship, so let me just put it out there. I have a massive bias, but I also think I'm right. So what is entrepreneurialism? Because I think there's this false idea that entrepreneurialism is a skill that you only teach entrepreneurs. Quite the opposite. I actually teach a lot of entrepreneurship to very, very high-level corporations, because entrepreneurialism is the ability to try to understand how you solve problems using critical mindset, like Anne said before. You create opportunities and you sort of learn from others, like Jeff mentioned before. I think entrepreneurialism is truly the skill of the future. And once again, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to become an entrepreneur, but everybody's going to become more entrepreneurial. And being more entrepreneurial is thinking ahead. So having both a combination of smart and sharp skills. I don't think entrepreneurship is a skill. I think it's a meta connection of skills, meta combination of skills. The same way I don't believe leadership is a skill, because it's a combination of multiple skills together. So the answer is absolutely yes. I used to be a kindergarten teacher. I taught my students how to think a little bit about being entrepreneurial, how to solve problems for themselves and others. And also I think an entrepreneurial mindset is also a more sustainable mindset, and I think we need both the skills desperately this last
100%.
decade of our century of our world.
We have another Facebook question here from Tyler or Thyla or Thila. Sorry, not sure how to pronounce that exactly. But just to sort of summarize, essentially, what can private educational institutions offer to bridge the gap in terms of education inequality? Essentially, is the question there. Anne, I would love for you to have a stab at answering that.
Okay, we get asked this question a lot because we've been moving forward with education, and right now the kind of education we're doing is it's an international school, right? But I just want people to understand that you can actually teach skills because we do have English centers, we have our private tutoring centers. So the way I liken it is you can get your kids there. It's just that which vehicle you want to get on, right? You want the public transport, you want the our local cars, or a Japanese car, or even a continental car, right? So it's just more add-ons. But the point is that it is critical for all to have the skills. What I found is this, though: not everybody wants the skills. Yeah. So there are two major issues with education. One is that it's not equal. It's been like this for hundreds of years. All right, equality, right? It's not equal. Number two is that it's too old. So for most of us, we have to take a stance in which direction we want to take. Either we are there to try to equalize education, or like it or not, we have to charge forward and pull it and yank it into the future. Okay, so but we realize this: you got to charge forward first. Once you charge forward and people see it works, then more will come along to want to help fulfill it because they see that it works. Most will not go there because they are worried it will not work. Now, the other equality you're talking about is those who have and those who have not. The have-nots require a lot of resources, and that has to come from the will of the government. Okay? Otherwise, you can go in and teach, but you can teach a small group of students at a time, and you got to keep moving, and so they get a little bit of shallow taste of what needs to happen moving into the future. But you got to move on to another group, and you can't take it further with any great depth. So those are some of the dilemma for education. But the will for all to equalize, it has to come from the government.
Right.
Okay.
100%. We've got another Facebook question here from HW. Essentially, how is our educational institutions contributing to the coming pressure of advanced technology demand? Do we have to accelerate to meet this pressure? Jeff, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, so the question is, how can education institute contribute to the coming pressure of advanced well, I think that's what we do. Our curriculum is actually just based on the industry's challenges, not what the industry has learned in the past. It's the challenges that the industry is facing today itself. So we go up to talk to all these corporate partners that we have, and we ask them what is one pressing challenge statement that you are currently facing in digital transformation. Is like a talk of the town, right, for all these corporates, right? So they will present to us a lot of these challenge statements that they have, that they're working on, and we use that as a curriculum. So what our students are actually learning is learning how to figure out today's problems, not really trying to look back at what has been done in the past. And so even though there are fundamentals that you can learn, but they can learn that on their own, right? So what we instill them is you build that fundamentals by yourselves with your peers. What we provide you is an opportunity to figure out how you can apply it in today's world itself, in today's industry, right? So I think that's what also needs to change. And I agree with Anne earlier on, she mentioned about the haves and the have-nots. We've seen that split as well. That's why in 42 we've opened it up in the sense where it's free, right? There's absolutely no cost for any individual above 18 years old to come in and wanting to upskill and reskill. The only thing that is really critical for you to make it in for the future of skills is to have the ability to that cognitive skills that we call it cognitive. Everyone has its own term, whether it's soft skills, whether it's the power skills of the future. We call it cognitive skills, right? But it's all coming down to the entrepreneurial mindset, right? So you got that analytical skills, your leadership skills, your problem solving skills. So these are the kind of things that we feel those that have in the haves not actually are more hungry. They are more passionate about making a change, and we've seen that, right? And what we've done is, if we can provide education for free, and it's just based on merit, how hungry are they to make a change? Can they invest their time into doing this? We notice like these new challenges that we present to them, they are the ones who will go out, and really innovate the way we would generally solve a problem. So I feel that's how, a lot of education institutions are also looking at, right? We've seen even us within the Sunway University have also looked at, current challenge statements, partnering up with many different corporates or even, universities around the world to figure out, how you can make it more relevant, and prepare the students at least to, what is about to come in the next 12 months or so. It's building that fundamental base where they can, going back to Anne's alarm clock, right? Is the inside that matters. The outside is what they will then go out and implement it.
Yeah, I mean, someone on LinkedIn actually mentioned that they really loved that clock example, right? Saying if it was a digital clock, the system behind it would be entirely different. And we also have another point from LinkedIn as well, from Noreen, who says, I don't know if the previous skills will become irrelevant. Learning takes time, with time and experience resulting in wisdom. Do we agree? But I think, where that's going is more, I think, more kind of empathy and as we mentioned before, learning all those skills, whatever you call them, right? Soft skills, smart skills, sharp skills, all of these basically are just learning how to be in the world, learning how to work with other people, and this is all stuff that all three of the institutions are sort of working on, right? It's essentially trying to get everyone to have a better mindset and be able to adapt and able to learn. Which I think is also what Steve on Facebook is trying to sort of get at. He asks, entrepreneurship is the insight to see ahead of the times and futuristic trends, perhaps. I think it might be a bit more than that. I don't know if Loredana, you've got any comment to respond to that particular question.
Like I said, I think entrepreneurship is in general, like just said before, it's a combination of multiple skills. And it does allow you to see in the future if you have what I call cognitive readiness and a system dynamics mindset, which is something that we teach at MIT and at the ASB. A cognitive readiness and system, sort of like a system thinking, allows you to understand the relationship between different parts of the world and how they get connected. Actually, a lot of our professors from MIT, once the pandemic started, they almost started predicted ad literam what's going to happen because they understood relationship between systems. Once you figure out how one system gets affected by the other system, it just sort of it gives you a. But I just want to make a comment. So my favorite expression and the title, this is not even a plug because I don't have a date for it, but the title of the next book that I hope to be able to write soon is called "The Job is Easy, the People Are Not." And I think whatever we're going to teach in the future, we're just going to have to teach people how not to be hard with themselves and with each other, in the sense that I am people too. I'm sure that I make somebody's job very hard, and Jeff and Anne and you, Christina, we are all people, right? Everybody here in the chat, we are all people. I think it's always easier to say, well, the job is easy, the people are not, but I'm also people. So I think we also need to understand that we're going to live in a planet with dramatically limited resources. And I think the only resource that we will continue to have is our creativity, entrepreneurialism, innovation, determination, and drive to solve problems. I hope that we will never run out of this resource. But if, like I said, if the job is easy, the people are not, I think we need to work on people a lot more than probably we need to learn on digital transformation, which is another subject that I teach. And I have to say, I always tell people, digital transformation is easy. People transformation is not.
100%. Okay, I think final question here. Basically wondering about how so much has changed over the course of the pandemic, and I think a lot of companies, they've learned how to really adapt to the times, they learn how to be flexible, and a lot of things have changed, I think, irrevocably, right? In this period of time. So in that sense, what trend or way of life or idea within the scope of learning or training do you guys think is never coming back? What is something that is sort of has been sort of rendered irrelevant by the pandemic in terms of learning? I think we'll go with Jeff first.
I continuous learning is just I mean, there's so many things that the pandemic has disrupted. To say that there is a good out of this is also not very tasteful, I believe, because there's been so many bad things that happen, and we started off and mentioned about how the frontliners have been really helpful, and there's so many things that's happened, right? And I won't say it's a good that this something good came out of this pandemic, but a positive that we can take on from this is that we need to be more open and ready for these kind of changes or sudden changes. What I've seen is that previously in the past we always had a mental limit of wanting to do something different, whether it's your workflow, whether it's learning something new. You would always you always have a reason not to do it, whether it's coming from you yourselves or whether it's coming from your management. If you're in a company, there was always a reason why we should not do it or why you should not do it. What the pandemic has taught us is that you should try to do it. If we could try to do it, figure a way out, if there is a method to do this, let's give it a shot, let's try to do it. And I feel that's something that we should continue on, right? Having that readiness to just accept something new and just try and see if it could work. I think years ago we would have never done this in this kind of setting, right? We would have been in some studio somewhere. We'd probably be in BFM's office, and we'd be having all kinds of. But now we could have these kind of sessions anywhere, right? So I think try is something that I would like to see that happen more in terms of the mindset, not having a limit that we set upon ourselves.
How about you, Professor Loredana?
So the question is what I hope that it will disappear, right?
Yeah, or what do you think has disappeared? Yes.
Or what do I think has disappeared? I hope what disappears is, or what I want to see more of, is the understanding that we are the only hope for each other. I know this is going to sound probably overly dramatic for 1:30 in the afternoon, but I mean, if you think about the best stories that came out of this quarantine and the worst stories that came out of quarantine, they always had the human component. And some of the most transformative moments in humanity, they were transformed by our own humanity. So once again, I talk so much about digital transformation, about AI, about technology, how that's going to save our life. And I always say, augmented intelligence and things like that. And I always say, before we augment artificial intelligence, I think we need to augment our own humanity. And I really hope that maybe COVID taught us to augment our own humanity and be more respectful and loving to each other.
Fabulous. And Anne, your statement on this?
Okay, I'm going to do what Jeff did, sidestep the question. Because what has disappeared, that's hard. That's hard. But what I can talk about is what we need to move forward,
Sure.
And that one, both Jeff and Professor Loredana, both of you hit it right on. Because we're dealing with kids on the ground, right? So in 2015, our DUIAMAS was the first entrepreneur school in the country, right? Because our students from year 1 all the way to 17. So yes, Professor, we need to talk. Yeah, after this, I get connected with you. So our students, it's already it's compulsory for them to learn, right? Entrepreneurship and practice and run businesses while they're still in school. This last year, just before the pandemic, we started our entrepreneurial kindergarten. And in the space of that 1 year plus, we just recently got an award for the first. We are the first entrepreneur kindergarten. No, actually, I'm not talking. I'm not so much focusing on that it's more the why. Right. First and foremost, children, especially at kindergarten, they have all the qualities of an entrepreneur, but it gets suppressed and gets educated out of them along the way. Like they have high energy. High energy is what people call passion when you're an entrepreneur. All right, when you go out to work. And they're not afraid to do things. They fail, they get up, and they move again. And that's exactly what an entrepreneur has to do. So that's why we felt that we have to do it from young, and along the way we keep growing the kids. And it's a long journey. It's not a once-off two-day kind of training, right? And I have a definition for entrepreneurship as well, because I was a teacher. I've been a teacher for 35 years. But it's one of those stories where I accidentally became an entrepreneur, right? And so one of the things I realized was this, because it's so hard, now we have to explain to parents what it is. What is it that we're trying to teach the kids? It's actually the spirit. The spirit of an entrepreneur is one where, if you like to you can call them the modern day adventurer, if you will. Okay, so and entrepreneurs, they will find a path where none has existed before, and even more importantly is they can literally build a superhighway. That is the spirit and the mind of an entrepreneur. And so when we explain that to the parents this way, they're like, oh. So then we ask them, wouldn't you want your kids to have this ability? And they're like, yeah, it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to say no. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well,
So,
on
yes.
that note, yeah, I think we're running out of time a little bit here, but thank you very much to all three of you for joining me as my panelists on today's Futurescapes. Of course, for everyone who has tuned in, thank you very much for tuning in as well and leaving your comments, your questions, all fantastic insights here. Now, do tune in to Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn same time next Thursday for the final Futurescapes webinar all about the future of leisure. And do not forget to fill in our super short feedback form down in the comments as well. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And that's about it for today's webinar. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.